Hi everyone, this is Katie Marsan and I'm here to tell you about one of my favorite kindergarten art projects, Portraits of the Tooth Fairy. I don't know about you, but my kindergartners love to talk about their missing teeth or their loose teeth, and so I thought we would just do a project on it. I like to start this lesson off by reading this book called Swatch by Julia Denos. It really gets the students excited about colors and excited about what they are creating, because the first step is to make what I like to call magic rainbow painted paper. So it's a great book to introduce the project. So from here, you are going to need a plate full of pre-cut square tissue papers in multiple colors. I like to put one on each table. I have a bunch of laminated mats just from construction paper, and I do this just because it's hard for students to put it on the drying rack, and also your paper is going to get really wet, so it's a great way to contain the mess. I use a cup of water and a paintbrush, and for this case I'm going to use a really large paintbrush to make it go a little faster. So what you do is you're going to start with any color tissue paper you want, and I'm going to start with blue. Place it anywhere on your paper, and we're going to take our paintbrush full of water and just paint right on top. And you should be able to see that there's some bluish water coming off the tissue paper. That means that it's working. There are some brands of tissue paper that don't do, so this is called bleeding. Some of them don't bleed, and so you're going to want to test to make sure as you're cutting your tissue paper that it works, because if not, your students are going to be disappointed. Some of them I find work better than others, and it's not the end of the world if one color doesn't work, but you want to make sure that most of them do. So I have my students do this until their whole paper is covered with tissue paper. I encourage them to overlap, which is kind of a hard concept for them in kindergarten to understand, and to go all the way to the edge of the paper, which again, that's really hard for them to understand. You can see just how wet my paper gets. So again, it's really important to have a mat. But I also wanted to say that it generally takes one class period to do this, including the introduction and the cleanup. If you want students, if you have a shorter amount of time, just use bigger brushes and maybe bigger tissue paper. If you have a longer period of time with your students, you can just cut the paper into smaller squares and use a smaller brush. All right, so I'm going to skip ahead to my finished piece. So I'm going to pretend that this is done even though it's not. And this is one I worked on earlier. The great thing about this process is that when it's dry, the tissue paper just peels right off. So you don't need glue, you don't need tape, it just falls right off. And we're left with this really cool rainbow-like paper. The kids are going to be very impressed by. I've had older students do this on like reward days just to kind of relax. You can really do this for backgrounds for really any grade, and they love it. And my students are always amazed that they can paint without paint, so just with water. So this is going to be our background. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a drawing of a portrait. So this was my example. And I generally have the kids sit in a circle on the carpet and we talk about the tooth fairy. They close their eyes and they imagine what she looks like. I ask them how tall she is, what she wears, is it a boy or girl? I ask them how the tooth fairy travels, where do they store their teeth in, and we get some really awesome, funny answers. So after that, we talk about how artists use shapes to make portraits of drawings of people, and I do an example and then I kind of let them loose to draw what they think the tooth fairy looks like. I pre-draw a circle on a piece of paper and then I have them draw inside the circle, and I do that because it's really hard for students to cut out really fine shapes, so it's just way easier for them to cut out the circle. I have them use crayons, colored pencils, and Sharpie to outline, but again, whatever, use your best judgment for your own class. And this gives them a great opportunity to practice cutting, because I know my class last year needed it really bad. Practice cutting in like a manageable way. So once we got this done, you can have your students just glue it right onto their rainbow paper. And I had them collage sequins and beads and yarn on top, but you could be done right here if you wanted to. So that's it. I hope it helped. Thank you for listening.